How is it going, everyone? A big news has dropped on the PlayStation front, as it does seem like PlayStation is changing their strategy when it comes to releasing their games on PC. And in fact, exclusives will be going back to being exclusives. This is a topic that certainly has a lot of people feeling some type of way. There is the lens that you can assess it as a consumer, and as a consumer, the general reaction would be, hey, I want games available on as many platforms as humanly possible to let as many people play those games. I also do think that is a very, very narrow view of everything going on, and you have to assess situations like this from all angles. You have to assess things, or at least understand. It doesn't mean you have to like it or even accept it, but you have to understand why PlayStation is doing what they are doing, and that is to preserve the value of their ecosystem, which I believe the value of their ecosystem has been greatly damaged over the last few years. Not just because of them putting their games on PC, just because of PlayStation doing a lot of decisions that didn't go very well with a lot of people. However, the other reality is, because of the market being the way that it is, and there not being a direct head-to-head console competitor, PlayStation hasn't really felt anything. They're trucking along as usual. However, there is an entity that has been gaining a lot of steam recently. No pun intended there, but pat on the back to me on that one. And that is, of course, Steam. Capcom outright has said 50% of their sales have come via PC gaming, and this is a very, very viable alternative. Not necessarily, as I've said before, sometimes you can view PC living on an island on its own, and I think for a long time that was true. However, I think the value differential from an optics standpoint has gotten so big that there are a lot of people that the one barrier for entry with PC gaming is the price point. And guess what? There are people on PlayStation that I'm sure that Sony and PlayStation would like to keep on PlayStation that do have jobs and do have disposable income, and they are being swayed on over to go to PC gaming. I don't think this decision of pulling PlayStation games from PC or dialing it back as far as what games they release is from the vantage point of, we need to get these PC players over on our side. No, it's about preserving the value of your ecosystem and keeping your core consumer base engaged to your platform. And for a long time, and I think for still a lot of people view that core consumer base, they're the most loyal. They're the suckers. They're always gonna buy what we put out, and I think for a long time, PlayStation had that vantage point as well. We don't need to worry about first-party games and doing a lot of first-party single-player games. What we need is more live service games. We need more money and more ecosystems within our ecosystem to generate even more passive revenue. But then they have started to diminish that goodwill from their most loyal of consumers. And yes, one school of thought is going to be, continue crapping on them. It doesn't matter. There isn't a direct head-to-head competitor. The goodwill we have with them doesn't even matter. Who cares about them? They're suckers. They're always going to buy our product. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is, hey, these people are our most loyal customers. They are the people that invest the most into our platform. Shouldn't we be treating right by them? And I think that school of thought will ultimately pay dividends, and it does feel like this is where Sony is going back to. It also feels like there are things going on right now, even after the closure of Bluepoint and whatnot, that Sony is gonna go back to what brought them to the dance. And what brought them to the dance wasn't spamming Concord and Horizon Hunting and Gathering. Look, we still need to go through a couple of these. We need Fair Game to bomb. We need Horizon Hunting Gathering to bomb. We need these few years that we've had very, very lackluster PlayStation first-party output to be a learning lesson. It's for the greater good. When I say I want PlayStation live service games to fail, it's because it's for the greater good. Sony cannot be trusted in having that power and having that thought, oh, anything live service we touch is going to turn to gold. You've had some W's in Helldivers. You've got Gran Turismo. You've got MLB The Show. You've got to be selective. It can't be, oh yeah, Concord. Oh yeah, Fair Game. Oh yeah, Burger Trailer. Anything we touch turn to gold. You ain't him, Sony. Not everything you touch is gonna turn to gold. And from my vantage point, it is important for Sony to feel a bit scarred by this era, just as a learning lesson. It's important to learn from your failures, and that's why I personally do want Horizon to fail. I personally do want Fair Game to fail, just because it'll reinforce this learning lesson, and ultimately I hope that it'll pay dividends in the long run and they'll course correct even stronger. So, Let's go on over to the story now after my tangent is done. Sony Group Corporation no longer plans to release its big PlayStation 5 games on PC, a major shift in strategy that sees the video game maker returning to console exclusivity after 6 years of flirting with multi-platform releases, according to people familiar with the company's plans. Online games such as Marathon and Marvel Tokon will still be released across multiple platforms. That makes all the sense, but the core consumer base, I think, really appreciates PlayStation for their big budget single player games. Those are the ones that people gravitate to, and those, even then, they came out on PC on a delay. That's why they didn't pull hundreds of thousands of concurrent players on Steam. There are single player games releasing on a delay. But single player titles such as last year's samurai hit Ghost of Yotei and the upcoming action game Sorrows will remain exclusive to PlayStation 5, said the people who asked not to be identified because they weren't authorized to talk publicly about the company's strategy. The people cautioned that things could change in the future due to the unpredictable nature of the video games industry, which, you know, things are very unpredictable and things change all the time, but for now, this is what's shifting, and that Sony's plans are constantly shifting, but in recent weeks, PlayStation scrapped plans to bring Ghost of Yotei and other internally developed games to PC. Two games made by external developers but published by PlayStation, Death Stranding 2 and the upcoming Kena Scars of Cosmora, are still planned for release on PC this year. Bear in mind, those are second-party titles. They are not first-party games. They're just published by PlayStation. Let me also add, Death Stranding 2 is set to be a failure on PC. Let me reiterate that. It is set to be a failure on PC. It is a delayed single-player release game on PC. Death Stranding 1 was already an incredibly divisive game. Oh, by the way, Death Stranding 2 is also $70 even after that delay. Oh, and by the way, it's coming out on the same day as Crimson Desert. So I very much expect that Death Stranding 2's Steam numbers are going to be incredibly lukewarm. We're talking like 25,000 concurrent players on Steam because either people are playing Crimson Desert or they don't want to spend $70 on a game that came out 9 months ago, and again, the first game was very divisive, and I think that'll be just used as ammunition for PlayStation, and PlayStation fanboys online, they'll be like, oh, you PC players don't buy your games, when, you know, that's completely missing context, but that's what we do here. We miss context of various things going on. A spokesperson for PlayStation declined to comment. There are likely a few reasons behind this shift. Several recent PlayStation games underperformed again. Spider-Man 2, disastrous PC version. Last of Us, disastrous PC version. God of War, Ragnarok, they tried to pull the account linking mandatory thing, and it was a disaster as far as that's concerned. But beyond anything else, I think this is to maintain the value of their ecosystem, and it's different from EA. It's different from Bethesda when they pulled their games from Steam and they tried to create an ecosystem. They were trying to create an ecosystem as an alternative to the premier brand on PC in Steam and Valve's platform. PlayStation already has an ecosystem that they've invested decades and decades into, and yes, they made X billion dollars on PC. A lot of that was from Helldivers 2, and by the way, Helldivers 2 games, Helldivers 2-esque games are still gonna end up on PC. But beyond just the money that they've made on PC, there's an unquantifiable damage that is done to PlayStation and that ecosystem, and that is from the optics. The optics have absolutely shifted from where they were at a decade ago. Think about where they were at a decade ago. PlayStation was revered for their top-level single-player titles. That is not the case anymore. What you'll see online is PlayStation has no games. PlayStation is live service slop. PlayStation isn't worth it anymore. The optics have absolutely shifted, and why there aren't any consequences is because they don't have any direct head-to-head competition. However, that PC audience is growing, and it's not about getting people on over from PC over to their platform. I don't think that's gonna happen. And if it is ever gonna happen, the 1-2 punch of Wolverine and Grand Theft Auto 6 is your only opportunity and your best opportunity to make something like that happen. But there's also that element of satisfying your core user base, and you'll satisfy your core user base by having games that are only available to people. And even if people are like, why do you care if it's on other platforms? Look, people want to feel valued, that their $500 investment and their investment into that ecosystem is rewarded with exclusives. Yes, I get it that people can also say, why not just have games on every platform? But exclusives are what draw people into an ecosystem, and I can understand from PlayStation's vantage point, hey, we tried, the return on investment just isn't there. The value on preserving the quality of our ecosystem and the perception of our ecosystem matters more. And it does. It absolutely does. Yes, it's not a quantifiable metric like we made X billion dollars with our PC releases. However, that X billion dollars on PC drop in the bucket compared to the overall value of an ecosystem and a successful ecosystem and that money you make passively, because it's not just about those games. It's those games offering a value proposition that get people engaged into that ecosystem, spending money on PlayStation Plus, spending money on the third-party games that, by the way, Sony collects a cut of, and they're making money hand over fist. But once you diminish that ecosystem, people leaving that ecosystem, that is your most worrying element of it all. And look at what's happened to Xbox. And who knows, is Xbox gonna go back to doing exclusives? I don't think they are. I think Xbox is just totally cooked, and I don't know how they could re-engage people within their brand, but we'll see. For PlayStation, I think it makes a lot of sense at this stage of the game, and I think they have to look at Steam and PC as a viable alternative. Maybe not a direct head-to-head competitor, but certainly an alternative that why would you diminish the value and the optics of your brand to juice up PC? And Steam is going to be releasing the Steam machine. Even if it's priced a little bit highly, look, PC offers a lot of benefits. It's a more open platform, cheaper games, free online as well, that you make your money back on the back end. And people aren't that dumb where they can't assess that, or at least a lot of people are going to be able to assess that and be like, hey, PC's just a better option, and why am I staying on PlayStation if these games end up on PC as well? It's the optics as well. I feel from PlayStation's standpoint right now, their biggest thing should be to restore the goodwill that they have with their core consumer, because I feel like they've done a lot of damage to that over the last few years. That, again, you can be of the school of thought that those people are the absolute suckers. You could destroy the goodwill all day long and it'll never hit you. You'll always have those people, but I do think there comes a point where you can't continually crap on them. And I don't think PlayStation is at that point where they've crapped on them so much where it's like a Ubisoft situation, but I do think at some point you do have to course correct, and the live service failures, them not releasing a lot of exclusives, I think all of that coupled together has hurt the optics of PlayStation a lot, and this is a necessary step for them to get back on track, at least from where I am seeing it. But there's a lot of takes. People are going to have a wide variety of opinions, and I think comparing it to any other situation, like, you know, Bethesda pulling away their games from Steam and other publishers, it's not the same. You're not comparing apples and apples. PlayStation has an established ecosystem that they have done damage to from an optics standpoint, and they need to restore that brand as well, and they need to drop top-level titles. And this year, with Soros, with Wolverine, next year, with the God of War spin-off title, with Intergalactic, which, you know, Intergalactic I think is another can of worms we could open up on another day, but they need to get back to doing what they do best, and that's dropping those games that make PlayStation a very attractive option. Look, you're gonna have people that buy PlayStations for the NBA 2Ks, the Call of Duties, and the Fortnites of the world, and they just want a console for those games, but there is another audience. There is another audience that plays games like your Soroses, like your Ghost of Yotes, like your Wolverines, and you have to satisfy that audience as well. And there's a bit of an overlap as well, I get that. But in terms of PlayStation's best outlook, it is managing the optics of your brand, and right now, I don't think the optics of the PlayStation brand are that good for the PlayStation consumer. Yes, the PlayStation games are coming out on PC, but ultimately, the PC players are just buying those on PC. That doesn't necessarily help the optics in the way that they want. The optics that they want is that the PlayStation console is a worthwhile investment, and that goes for the people that are already within that ecosystem, people that are questioning their investment into that ecosystem, and potential newcomers as well. It's a lot of facets to this, but that'll do it for me. Interested to hear what all of you think. Just so many layers to this that I think some takes are just viewing at it from one angle, and there's so many different ways you can view it, from PlayStation's lens, the PC players' lens, the core PlayStation audience's lens, and I'm trying to come at it from the angle of assessing everything. But that'll do it for me. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, sound off there. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.